So, first, good afternoon, everybody. I would like to welcome all of you and thank you for being here one more time. For those who have already participated in our first session. Today, we do have our second online discussions on TBLT. So in our first encounter, our aim was to reflect a bit on TBLT and teacher education in the Brazilian context. For that, we invited Professor Roseli Xavier and Professor Paula from the Universidade Federal do Paraná. Today, the focus relies on technology-mediated TBLT. So if I were to choose a name to talk or to represent this field of knowledge, the intersection between tasks and technology, this name would be Marta González Lloret. And fortunately, we are very lucky to have Marta with us here so that we can talk a bit on this very interesting and fruitful field of research. So thank you very much, Marta, for having accepted our invitation and being with us here this afternoon. Okay?
My pleasure.
Okay, thank you. And to mediate the session, so I have with me Juliane Trevisol. She is my former advisee. She presently teaches, she's a professor at the Universidade do Estado da Bahia, and she's the person who should be here also because she conducted her doctoral dissertation reflecting on the impact of storytelling in learners' L2 speech production. And technology is at the heart of her discussions. So also with us today, some and many of our research group members that we will always be giving us support for the technological issues that might appear and also for sending you the links for the certificates and annotating questions that you might have to pose at the end of our talk. And also if something does not go well, we know that there is somebody we can count on, okay? So the format of our session today is going to be slightly different from our first encounter because today there is only Marta here. So we thought of having some questions and answer moment as the first moment of our interaction. And then we have thought of bringing some testimonials, a student talking about his experience online, and also a public school teacher talking about that. And the idea is that we listen to them and then that Marta can comment on the issues that they bring, okay? So without further ado, let us start this talk. And thank you again for everybody who is here with us watching, and for Marta for waking up so early because she is back at Hawaii and being us this afternoon. Okay, Ju?
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Hi, Marta. Let me just briefly introduce Marta here. So Professor Marta is a professor at University of Hawaii. She holds a master and a PhD in second language acquisition from the same university. One of her main interests is called computer-assisted language learning. Most of the courses that she teaches at University of Hawaii incorporate technology to learn Spanish in a practical manner. And her publications focus mainly on second language acquisition, technology, and TBLT. Okay, so thank you again, Marta, for being here with us. Now, Professor Raquel may start with the first question that we have for you.
Okay, thank you, Sue. Again, Marta, it's really a great pleasure having you with us. And then our first question deals with this issue of how you got interested in this field. So in 2014, Lourdes Ortega published this book that opened up a new framework that you called Technology-mediated TBLT, right? Which unveils the intersection between tasks and technology. So the question is, what motivated you to embrace this field of interest and research?
That's a very good question. No one has ever asked me that question before.
Really? Really? It was the first thing that I thought that when we were discussing in our group what to ask you. I said, well, I think that it's really nice that Marta tell us the paths that she embraced so as to reach, this niche of interest and study.
I always was interested in technology, but now we give for granted that everybody has all kinds of technology. I never had my first computer or my laptop until 1992, until I actually came to the United States. So technology was never in my past, but I think I quite early realized that technology can be useful and that exploring it was worth it. And it was kind of the same thing for tasks. When I started learning about tasks, I had one of my first classes with Mike Long here at the University of Hawaii, and he's one of the first person to start talking about tasks. After I took that class, technology was not in anybody's horizon, but every time I would talk about tasks, I thought, this is a lot like technology. I mean, there's lots of things in common between what a task is and experiential learning, which is the main philosophy behind task-based language teaching, and technology, because we learn technology by experiencing it, right? I mean, who reads the instructions that come with their phones? Almost no, right? How do you learn to use your phone? Well, you start using it, right? And that's how you learn it. So to me, technology and tasks had really philosophical things in common. And from there, I started exploring, what those commonality were and how things could merge a little bit. And in 2007, when I got my PhD, I already started looking at tasks and technology. It was quite basic because at that time there was not a lot of really good technologies, but I did a telecollaboration for my data gathering. And from there on, I thought it was a field worth exploring it. And it took 7 years for it to kind of take. I think it took for technology to be part of everybody's lives and normalize as part of our lives, for people to actually see that there was these great parallels between them.
Oh, yes, quite interesting, Marta, right? And for us to think that nowadays technology is everywhere, and if it weren't for technology, we wouldn't be here, right? Especially with these pandemic days nowadays, and more, these issues of how technology and tasks go or walk hand in hand, if you think that, because we learn by doing, and that's pretty much, as you have mentioned, the philosophy behind TBLT and also the philosophy behind technology, right?
Right.
Okay. So would you like to say something, Ju?
No, I agree very much with this idea. I had never thought about that in that way, but it's so true that we learn by experiencing it. I am this kind of person that whenever technology comes to mind and I have to learn a new tool, I can never even follow a tutorial online because I think it's boring a bit. I prefer to go and experiment with the platform, trying to learn by myself. So it's somehow the way we deal with tasks, yeah, and the philosophical underpinnings of TBLT. So it's very interesting to look through this perspective. Very nice, Marta. I guess we should move to the second question now, because we have lots of questions for you. And our second question is this. As Warschauer 2012 says, technology in itself is no magic bullet. Yeah, we know that. That is, using technology in the classroom is no guarantee that the activity will have a pedagogical purpose, or even that the use of technology makes, in fact, a difference in language development. Yeah. Considering that, then, what are some advantages of using technology as part of tasks, and how to avoid the use of technology simply as a tool and instead have technology used with a purpose? What do you think about that?
Totally, I agree with Mark Warschauer. He talks about this technological determinism, which means that just because we include technology, we think things are going to be better, right? Students are going to be learn more, and they're going to be more motivated, and that this is what he talks about, that magic bullet, right? And that is actually not the case with anything. It's not the case with technology. It's not the case with a new activity that you bring into the class. It's not the case with anything, really. I mean, for anything to produce learning, there has to be a philosophy of learning behind it, right? We have to understand how learning is happening. And I think the key here is to understand that it's not about the technology. It's about the methodology that is behind the technology. So technologies change really fast. So, I mean, we can think not just the hardware, right? Which, if you think about it, you know, phones used to be really big and they're getting smaller and smarter and smarter and smarter, but also the applications and the types of involvement that we do with the technology. So if the technology was actually what produces the learning, every time there's a new technology, then we will have to reinvent learning. And that's not happening, right? What we want is to have a methodological base that we say, okay, this is how we believe that people learn languages. This is what I'm going to do to facilitate it. And technology is one more aspect of it that serves the tasks, that serves your methodology. It's like thinking about a book, right? Oh, just because I'm changing books, students are magically going to learn more. Well, no, it may facilitate the learning more, right? And that's what technology is. It's going to facilitate that learning if it is a well-chosen technology. There's a lot of technologies out there that, you know, they're great for what they are, but they may not actually serve learning either, right? So technology is a tool and we have to use it wisely, but we have to be careful not to think that technology is just a tool, right? Technology also transforms people, transforms the tasks themselves, transforms your lessons. So it is a very powerful tool in a way. So if you think in a task, in a typical task like a map, reading a map and where you're going in a map, right? Doing something in a paper map and do it in a phone map, it's very different. And it's not just the technology, it's actually the task gets transformed, right? Suddenly we don't need to ask anymore, oh, could you tell me where I am, please? Because we have a little blue dot that tells us that, right? So that has transformed already the task, right? We may not actually be asking, how do I get to a bakery, right? Because we actually now know how I get there. That's not the question anymore, right? Now that engagement is about something different, like which is the best bakery around here and what can I buy there, right? And do you recommend me to go this way so that I see something interesting on the way there, right? We may be learning very similar language, but the task itself has changed. Just because we introduced a phone rather than a map, than a paper map. So it is a tool, yes, but it's a powerful tool that actually transforms the task, and it transforms people. And this is one of the beauties and the dangers of technology. We have to be careful, because when we give a tool to people, people learn to use that tool, and that means something. And that's the beauty, because we can incorporate digital skills. We can teach students digital skills at the same time that we teach them language. So, of course, if they do a paper map, they would also be learning a type of a skill, right? So it's not just a tool, but it's definitely not a magic bullet. It has to be used in combination with a good methodology.
Very interesting, Marta. Yes, okay. Sure. And if Raquel allows me to say a little bit, when you said about the digital skills and how powerful technology can be, as the result, let's say, of my dissertation, I think it was a very powerful moment for the participants in the study who had to create a digital story reflecting about their experiences becoming English teachers. This is also a moment for that, and not only learn about language, but also develop the skills, the digital skills for video editing, for instance, which was something that they learned by doing during the whole process, let's say. So it's very powerful in that sense too. And as you mentioned, it can change people's lives, yeah. And as some of them mentioned, it might have changed their life, because they become even more aware about the possibilities, becoming teachers now, yeah, teachers of the language. It's very interesting. Raquel.
I would also like to comment on that, because also another advisee of mine, Gisele, some years ago, she conducted a study with, let's say, people who are more than 60, and then wow, they had to choose a destination to go, and then because of that, they had to go to the internet to look for places and to decide on what to visit when they would go there. And well, when asking them about the experiences they faced, one thing that popped up as very important was the fact that, well, it was not only about learning English, it was about learning other things, very important things for us, you know, to go to the internet, to search for things. So in this sense, it's very, very powerful, right? And we really should try to take advantage of it. Well, so let us continue with our third question. Marta, in recent years, we have witnessed a shift towards greater use of technology in the implementation of TBLT, especially with the advent of social networking, mobile technologies, and the widespread availability of digital games, building room for authentic opportunities for communication in the classroom, which lies at the heart of TBLT pedagogy, as we have already mentioned it. So you have already talked about, you know, the experience of this map thing, which is completely different if you think of having a paper map as opposed to a map on your phone. But could you go a bit further in the sense of sharing with us a successful teaching learning experience with the use of technology and highlight the challenges, possibilities in this process?
Okay, that's a big question. I think an anecdote of a good successful experience. I had a student a few years back in the class was communicative, like we call it the Spanish conversation class, so an intermediate level. And we did a telecollaborative project. It was a task-based class. We did this telecollaborative project with the students in Spain, Hawaii and Spain. And this student just hated it. He did not want to learn new tools. We created websites for the students that were coming to Hawaii, virtually coming to Hawaii to understand how life in campus was and the university and everything. He did not want to meet the students outside. He didn't want to learn new tools. He hated it. He gave me a really bad evaluation at the end too, with all these things. But he wrote me about 3 months later, and he told me he got a really good job in Florida because first, he could speak Spanish, but second, because he could build websites. And that was the little edge that he got from everybody else that did that interview. So he apologized for the bad evaluations, and he said that, you know, what he had learned in that class had gone way beyond just the degree that he got. So in that same class, someone actually traveled to Spain after the telecollaborative work that we did, decided to stay there and end up marrying one of the girls that were on the project too. So to me, those are two super sweet stories for that telecollaborative project. But I think, you know, there's only these little moments that are like super success stories. But I think when I see my students learning, it's obvious to me that TBLT works. So, you know, I didn't used to teach with TBLT before, and I was fortunate enough to arrive to Hawaii when people were using communicative language teaching already. But I myself learned, you know, with really very translation method, really terrible. And after studying so many years, I just could not speak at all. First time I went to England and I asked for a bear at a bar, the guy just laughed at me and said, "You mean a beer?" I mean, because we don't really have bears here, you know. So I was so embarrassed and everything. And this was after like 8 years of studying the language. So when I came here and I was immersed in CLT, I thought, ooh, this is better. This is better. But then, you know, 3-4 years later, students were exactly doing the same mistakes that they were doing in first year. And their language complexity was not that good either. I'm like, you know, it's okay. You know, at some point you have to move from asking for an enchilada to something much more sophisticated, right? And that was not happening either. So for me, learning about TBLT and seeing how students actually complexify their language and were getting as much more sophisticated as speakers was an eye-opener. So for me, was seeing it every day. And I've been teaching languages for 28 years. So I can see it. And to me, that's the success is right there. Challenges, for sure. I mean, you know, implementing change is never easy. Implementing TBLT was not easy. From my experiences of doing like full curriculum where it's kind of imposed from the top and you just go in there and try to do your best to work with them and everything. Does not work very well. It's got to be a bottom-up thing. Teachers have to be involved in the development of tasks if you want the tasks to succeed and the teachers to invest in doing TBLT. And it's kind of the same with technology. It has to, you know, imposing things is not the best way to go. You have to get everybody involved in deciding what technologies, for what purpose, what are we going to gain out of it. And that's why I think doing needs analysis is such a essential step in trying to implement not just TBLT, which, you know, it recognizes that it's an important step, but any implementation that you want to do in your classes, even in your little one class, right? You want to change something, you have to know how it's going to affect all of the members of that community. Otherwise, it's you're kind of piloting a blind plane. It's not a very good idea. But it's hard. It's hard. Change is always hard for people, no matter what.
Yes, Martha, very, very interesting, the examples that you brought. And I think that we always have to, let's say, think of what is meant by a successful learning or teaching experience that indicates success extrapolated the classroom, let's say, boundaries. And in the sense of that also sometimes we do have to give students a time for them to perceive, you know, the let's say, the beauty of technology. Because sometimes our students, they are really good at dealing with technological resources and things, but they are not really accustomed with dealing with the technology for learning purposes, let us say, right? And as you said, I think that implementing tasks is already in itself a challenge, because we still face classes and students who come from very traditional learning experiences, and they do expect you to go on with that grammar thing, with this very teacher-centered, let's say, classes. But again, I think it's our role to try to change the scenario, right?
Totally.
Especially based on the very successful experiences that we have been facing and reading about with TBLT, and also TBLT with technology, right?
Correct. Totally.
And not to diminish our own motivation too when we face students such as this one that give us a very bad mark, even though we do believe in the work we're doing and we believe it's for
I guess that Ju?
Cold wind came and she got frozen.
Yes. Yeah, because she's supposed to be in charge of our next question. I don't know, you know, if she comes back soon. It has to do with the internet connection, right?
Oh, there she goes.
Ju?
Oh, sorry, I guess
you are back.
I'm back.
Okay. So you were talking about not giving up when we face some sort of not very favorable evaluation.
Yeah, very happy students, yeah, because not all the time students are going to be instantly motivated by the tasks that we propose, yeah. But I mean, it's part of the job as well, yeah. And if we do believe in what we're doing, if we do have, as Marta pointed out, this very strong methodology in the back in which we believe and try to follow, creating these opportunities for learning, I think there should be success in the way, even though it's not immediately seen, yeah, by the students. Yeah, okay.
I think having a reflective component is also a good thing. I've learned that lately. I mean, after that experience. So it's also part of experiential learning. If you take John Dewey's theory of experiential learning, there's a reflective component where if we don't really reflect on your experience, we're not so aware of it, and therefore we can't benefit so much from it. So that's one of the things that I'm starting to incorporate in the TBLT framework also when I teach. So rather than just doing at the end, you know, teacher evaluations, which is what we do here in the United States, I get the students first always kind of like the mini needs analysis that they do at the beginning, a mini reflection at the end. And, you know, now that we are all online, I just do it in Google Forms. It's just 3 questions, you know, what have you learned from here? What did you think you would not learn and you have learned, right? What would you have learned and you didn't get to learn? Because, you know, that also happens. And, you know, I usually ask them, in 10 years from now, what would you remember from this class? And I think that helps them a little bit, you know, really reflecting on what has happened to them. And, you know, they don't have to do it. It's something voluntary, it's anonymous. So they usually come up with really interesting things. And I hope that serves them, you know, as part of their learning experience also.
Very interesting. I've just taken notes from your last question. In 10 years from now, because I'm going to start inserting now in my reflective moments with the students. Because, yeah, I agree. It's a very important also part of the whole process to have this reflective moment so that they can really figure out by themselves how meaningful it was for them, yeah, which learning opportunities they could perceive from what they have done, from what we have proposed, and what missed, maybe, so that we can know how to move forward in the following task, let's say, yeah. Okay, should we move on to the following question then?
Yes, Sue, I think that we might go on.
Okay. So, as you, Professor González Lloret, and Professor Lourdes Ortega, 2014, advocate, it's necessary to consider the specificities of tasks that make use of technology. In other words, it's not simply the incorporation of technology that will make an activity a task. That is, technology does not guarantee that the activity will be contextualized, meaningful, etc. Yeah? Though it may work so as to promote task-like characteristics. Well, keeping that in mind, what are the biggest challenges and possibilities involved in the process of designing and implementing technology-mediated tasks?
Okay, I think in general for teachers, the first step is to understand the process of designing a task. And I think teachers are, when you say, okay, we're gonna do authentic tasks, teachers get a little bit overwhelmed. It's like, well, what do I do, right? There's so much that can be done. So I think I'm going again back to the needs analysis. I think needs analysis seems like something that is more of a chore, something difficult to do. But actually, once you have your needs analysis done, so much of that guessing is out of the picture, because the needs analysis is going to tell you, well, pretty much what tasks you need to do. And of course, maybe you don't have time in your curriculum for everything. And, you know, students may have different ideas also, but if you grab the 2, 3, or 4, or 5, whatever, depending on your time frame, tasks that the student says that they want to do or they need to do, as well as, you know, having input from teachers or the administration or future employers. So once you select those 4 tasks, then everything is a little bit more clear, because you think, okay, well, out of these tasks, which ones are actually in the real world mediated by technology? They may not all be, and then we don't need to implement anything if they're not, right? But what if they are? Right now, you know, hardly no one sends a curriculum in a letter. We email curriculums, right? Which means writing an email introducing us as the candidates for a job is one of the most important emails you're going to write in your entire life, right? That is a super important task. And that is mediated by technology. So therefore, we need to learn, you know, what are the characteristics of such email? What are the pragmatics of such email? The language could be perfect. The grammar could be perfect and really be a terrible email. with, very rude, not polite enough, with not the right parts that need to be there. So, but that comes from knowing the task. So once we know the task, we can specify, okay, which ones are mediated by technology. And then we start designing, right? Then we say, okay, I'm gonna just go with that example. So if we have a task, which is applying for a job, right? We're going to have to decide, okay, what are the parts of that task, right? And those are like our subtasks. So applying for a job means being able to read a job advertised in the target language, identify the parts that are important for me to include in my letters from a job advertisement. So that's a subtask. Then we have writing the actual email. Then we have writing the answer, or actually reading the answer, right? And maybe answer to that with more information or attachments or things like that. Okay, and then we look at the technology and we say, okay, what technology mediated? We need to be able to upload and download stuff. We need to be able to write a CV, right? That we're gonna be able to upload there. So we have content, we have technology, and then of course we have to think of the language, right? So what language comes in this email? What language comes in writing also a CV, in answering a letter? So there we have the other components. So one is the task. The other is what language do we need for this task? What technology we need for this task? And now we start designing, right? Now we start designing the activities, or what we call sometimes the pedagogic tasks, right? And now I know what language I need. Well, how am I going to teach that language, right? It's not just by writing an email, they're going to learn the language. That language is going to have self-introductions, it's going to have specific forms, right? And here is where I can do pedagogic tasks. I can actually teach grammar if I need to, right? Because if students don't know how to do presentations, well, maybe I need to teach presentations. And what verb tense do we use to write a letter, right? I need to learn those verb tenses. So there's where the pedagogic language tasks come. And then the same thing for the technology. In sending an email, there are different components. I need to know how to upload and download an attachment. So that's something that we need to teach the students how to do. They need to practice it with different things, different times. And so you have to think about those components, the language tasks, pedagogic tasks, the technology pedagogic tasks. And then if you start building those components, it gets a lot easier to actually design any tasks. So we have to stop thinking about, oh, this is a whole task, and what do I do with this, right? How are they going to learn this? It's not just a repetition of this task 20 times. It's we have to go deeper, 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 and practice down here first until the students are able to do more and more and more and more until they're actually able to do the full task at the end. So I think my advice really for the design is to think first on the task and then go down and start breaking that task into parts and designing for those little parts in there. The most difficult thing, I think the biggest challenge is actually how to sequence tasks. And I am afraid to say that we haven't resolved that yet very well. It's, a new field. We know quite a bit about how to sequence tasks from the TBLT literature. So, from Robinson's hypothesis and Skin hypothesis, we know a little bit what tasks are more complex than others. And we want to start with some that are less complex and move to more complex. But unfortunately, the research that we have in technology tells us that it does not work very well. Those frameworks don't work very well with technology because there's an added component, right? And how that added component, which is the technology, how cognitively that added component affects the tasks, we don't know a lot yet. So if anybody's looking for dissertations, that's a huge field. Yeah, that's a very interesting and a very big field. So that's, I think, the challenge. It's like, okay, now I have all of these tasks, right? So what do I do now? Which one do I do first, right? How do I do it? So since we don't have a lot of research supporting that, I always tell teachers, well, the easiest way to me is doing it chronologically and then looking at the language complexity. If you're a language teacher, or you can talk to an experienced language teacher, we know that in Spanish, for example, present tense is a lot easier than past tense because there's like 2 past tenses for 1 in English, right? And then subjunctive, relative clauses. So we know a little bit about the language. So if you think that the language is more difficult, that means it's more complex, put it towards the end a little bit, right? In one of my publications, got a book right here. Yep. I have a list, that's the publication, but I have actually a long list, so I'm not gonna go through it, but it's kind of a list digested for teachers on things that are more and less complex, that are easy to see. So things like the number of items that you're having students to work with, or actually whether there's more skills or less skills involved, or whether what you're talking about is in now and here versus something that is abstract. So there's a few ways of looking at complexity, but that's definitely the challenge.
Okay.
Too much info, sorry.
No, perfect, Marta. Raquel wants to comment about anything? I
unmute. Yes, I did. It's still many challenges, and I guess that this issue of sequencing, what comes first, and sometimes having to deal with a task that should be done first, but requires more complex language, let's say, for because of the nature of the task itself and how we cope with that, how we prepare students. But anyway, I think that there is still this path that has already been taken, and then it's our task to really, reflect on that and try to research and to systematize our own practices so that we find the ways. It's not easy to cope. Teaching is very complex in itself, right? And also this shows the biggest, also a big challenge that we do have when we think of teacher development and the importance of, let's say, introducing the concept of tasks and let them experience designing tasks so that they can think of implementing tasks and design their own tasks when they do come for the time that they will be teaching. But I don't know, in Hawaii, is there a policy for task-based language learning and teaching, Marta, as there is in Belgium, for instance, when we think of all the movements of Van den Braden, and also nowadays in Australia with East, right?
Mm-hmm. We do have a curriculum that is task-based, but we started it little by little. So we didn't say, okay, we're going to change to task-based right away. So we started doing task-enhanced CLT. So teachers started becoming more comfortable with doing a few tasks here and there, started understanding how tasks work, how, we make them work for us, for our context, for our students. And then little by little, we have been changing to make it a more task-based syllabus. Students still, and my teachers also wanted a book. Like a book is something that is like a blanket in winter. It's like you have to have a book. Otherwise, it's like no one is happy without books. So we actually found for Spanish, for teaching Spanish, there's a book that is quite task-based. And what we did is we used that as the basis, and then we built on that more tasks that we thought were important for students based in the needs analysis that we did at the beginning of the change of the program. And it's worked because students have something, so they can always go and say, oh, but I need to review past tense. Okay, well, go to page 480 at the end of the book is there, right? And they have these grammar activities. If they need more focus on form, they go there and they do it. So I think I'm not one of those purist people that say, oh, you know, TBLT has to be this way and it's pure. I do not believe that. I've been in the classroom way too much to know that that's not the reality, right? Each context has its own reality. The teacher's perceptions of what they can do and then what they want to do is essential. Like you say, teacher support, teacher development. If teachers are not understanding what they are doing, they're just gonna keep doing what they were doing before. You know, they're just gonna go back and teach grammar, gonna take past tense on Monday because that's what's on Monday, right? So teachers need to understand, and they need to invest, and they need to buy into the idea that this works. And I think putting a few tasks here and there, in my case, it gave my teachers, it opened my teacher's eye to understand, oh, wow, they are actually learning the language and they're enjoying it. And at the end, they're able to do things that we're not able to do before. So this is working, right? So it was up to them to say, okay, let's do more, let's do more. So a little seed goes a long way.
Yes, for sure. Thank you so much, Marta. This question was not only script, but it popped up as you have answered the previous one. And then I guess that it's our last question, and then we are going to move to the second moment of our interview, in which we're going to listen and watch some testimonials of a public school teacher and also a public school English. But before we finish this part, maybe, although somehow you have already said or mentioned that, this is just to build up opportunity for you to elaborate a bit more. So in a few words, if this is possible, but you take as many words as you need, how do you see the future of technology-mediated TBLT? So what still needs to be investigated? Somehow you have already answered, but maybe you can say a bit more. And what is the next step in terms of research?
Okay. Oh, there's still so much to do because it's a fairly new field, right? So there's, I would think by now we have more questions than answers, actually. So there's lots of things to investigate. I already talked about complexity. That would be one. I think also as different tools come out, one of the most fun things to do is to explore the affordances of new technology. So a new technology comes out, and we have to figure out whether that technology fits within the methodology of TBLT and how we can exploit that technology to, you know, do good tasks. Also, because the new technologies are what mediated the tasks, we have to keep up with those technologies. So it's a little bit of a yin and yang, right? If now we are saying CVs are not anymore on the mail, they're on email, but maybe in 2 or 3 years, there will be some different way of sending our CVs. Actually, there are already new ways of sending CVs. Now, a lot of people request that you do a video CV. So yeah, you send the paper one, but they actually want a video presentation of yourself as a CV. So you have to introduce yourself, see who you are, give your credentials, but everything on video because they want to see you. They want to see your personality, if you're able to speak, have eyes contact. So already CVs have evolved to a new multimedia, right? And that's why we need to look at the tasks, what mediates them, and then how do we prepare students to be able to do those tasks. So different tools bring different research. Also, we don't know a lot about most of the research has concentrated in a few technologies. So mobile technologies are quite new and we don't know a lot about them. And they mediate lots of different tasks. So we need research on mobile technologies and how they mediate different tasks. And also social networks. I think we haven't talked about this, but the definition of what a task is has also expanded, and that's a good thing. And things that are now of social nature, we understand how important those are as tasks. So before, tasks were very utilitarian in nature, so things that you do, right? But we realize now that actually social encounters and being able to talk to someone and being able to maintain social relationships are also tasks, right? So things like meeting someone for the first time is actually a task, and it's a really important task because that may facilitate or prevent the rest of your tasks, right? So those kind of social tasks, I think, they're quite new to TBLT. And I think that is a really important task. So I work a lot with pragmatics and TBLT too. And that's kind of my other line of research. I think social networks are way underexplored as places for tasks. And I think that's a huge value that needs to be studied. In general, new trends in SLA, like the importance of multilingualism and allowing translanguaging in our tasks, right? So far, it was always, SLA always said, well, input is super important, and we know it's still very, very important, right? So L2 only, L2 only, L2 only. And now lately, we have a whole trend in SLA, including, my colleague Lourdes Ortega, who's saying, well, translanguaging is a really important issue for people to actually learn a second language. So what role translanguaging plays in TBLT? Completely open. It has not even been a study at all, right? And also the field of SLA, and also Lourdes Ortega, it's looking at all about to the role of social justice in the implementation of anything that has to do with technology and with language learning, right? So how do people that learn a new language benefit at different scales, different social scales, right? And that again is a super open field in TBLT and in technology-mediated TBLT. There's nothing really done on that. So, and teacher training, which is essential. It's not very developed in TBLT. I keep saying, yeah, we need to develop teachers. We need to help teachers. We need to develop materials for teachers to learn to do TBLT. But not much done in that field either. So there's quite a bit of fields open. So if anybody's looking for PhD topics or research topics, just write to me. I'll give you a list.
Marta, thank you so much. So many ideas, right? And as you said, I guess that every time that we end up a research project, or much more important than the answers that we have got are the questions that still remain there, right? And that's the beauty of the game, after all, for us to be able to keep looking for the unknown. And because every question that has been asked, if it has been answered, but then it poses other questions, and that's how we progress.
Right. Totally right.
Plenty of ideas for research projects, and also for us to reflect on, especially, what we have been doing in our classrooms, and how we can always refine our teaching so that it ends up reflecting on learners' learning, right?
Yeah.
Ju?
Okay, so we should move now to moment 2. We're now going to share 2 testimonials. And we would like Marta to comment on them. The first testimonial was sent to us by Andressa Regiane Gesser. She's a public school English teacher in Brazil. Let's watch the video then.
Good afternoon, I am Andressa and I work as an English language teacher in a municipal school in Blumenau, Santa Catarina, Brazil. The process of teaching and learning a language has changed a lot in the current context. In a short period of time, we, teachers, had to re-elaborate our planning for the remote teaching context, using the resources from Google Classroom platform. One of the biggest challenges in this context concerns the interaction and mediation. For example, in face-to-face instruction, I used to plan interactive tasks to be carried out in pairs. However, in the remote instruction, this is one of my biggest difficulties for numerous reasons, such as the lack of access by students to technologies and a quality internet. In addition, although I prepare classes in Google Meet, few students are able to access on the time of the class, which makes the process of mediation and interaction between teacher and learner a little more difficult.
Yes, and she is quite modest, not just a little bit more, it's quite more challenging. Yeah. All right, so I think a few different things. Just like, I think we need to, not always we're able, but we need to choose the tool that best serves our purpose, right? This is what we were saying about technology. So if we say, okay, I have this tool, this technology, like in this case, Meets, right? Google Meets, but I cannot do what philosophically I am supposed to be doing to teach my classes, but that's not the best tool, right? It's like, okay, we can hammer a nail in a wall with a screwdriver, but it's not going to do a good job, right? It's better to go and look for a hammer. So I think in this case, for example, Zoom has breakout rooms, right? Which Google Meets does not have. So at the beginning of the pandemic, when we all went online, part of my job in my department was actually to find the best tools for teachers to be able to teach in the way we were teaching, similar to we were teaching. So teachers didn't have to change the entire way that they were teaching. And we found that Zoom and breakout rooms was a very optimal tool because it allowed us to actually keep doing interactive activities. So I would say, look for a tool that it's a tool that serves you. And, it's not always easy, but at least students have the spaces to do this interaction. If that is not possible because Zoom is not, part of your tools that you have in your school, then maybe at least asynchronous interaction. So there's tools that are free and available, like, Flipgrid or Edpuzzle, or that you can actually have students record their voice and then have us students answer. So kind of a voice blog type of things, at least students more presentational than interactive, but at least they are using the language a little bit, right? Things like Adobe Spark, where students can create digital stories like Juice, she did in the dissertation, are things that also allow for language use, not interactive, but at least it's a little bit better. And also allowing students maybe to use the tools that they already have to engage with other people that may not be their classmates, but that means they are talking. So if you have students that are gamers, allow them to game for 3 hours a week in the target language, right, with other speakers of the language. Allow them to join a guild that speaks English or that speaks French or whatever language they are learning. And that's 3 hours that they are talking in the language, not with you, but that's okay. It's student-centered, right? The teacher doesn't have to be there. You can ask them to record their talks and send them to you if you want, right? If they're not gamers, then you're not gonna send them to gaming. But you know, if they like writing, then maybe they can join fan nets, right? Fandoms or Reddit, FanNet, and they can read things that are interesting to them. They can write things. So through writing, they're actually interacting using the language. And again, you can require them 3 hours a week of language, whatever way, right? Doesn't have to be like all together. Maybe try a telecollaborative project that they can do outside of the class. And then they can use whatever tool. They can use WhatsApp on their phone. They can use FaceTime. They can do anything. And there's free tools. So there's italki, for example, is a free tool that students can do it on their own. Or there's different, I can give you several of the sites like PenPals or eTandem, where you can find projects to do with your class. And if you request them to do it outside, then they have more tools that you can use. So that would be one. And if you decide to change and do Zoom and breakout rooms, as soon as we went into the pandemic, the journal Language Learning asked for people to write things, and the AQUILES Association asked for people to write things. And so I got an article published in 2020, which is collaborative tasks for online language teaching. And this was basically, I wrote it for my teachers. It's like, okay, this is a bunch of activities that you can do and that, you know, will help you to do all of these collaborative things. So I'll be happy to share it with you if you want. And, or I can just, you know, copy the here in the chat, the DOI. But I can also, if you don't have access to here, chat, that's a DOI. But if you don't have access to the foreign language annals, then I can share it with you. So there are tools and there are activities out there that people can use to make it more interactive. I think that's what most of the question was about. Did I miss anything?
No, just perfect, Marta. Okay. Thank you so much. Yes, please do share, right? Okay. With us if you can. Okay.
Yes, I will.
Right.
Yes.
And then
I'm sorry, I was just going to add that we from the AQUILES group, we have already read your article, and I've shared it with my students also, and I'm sure all the other members of the group have also shared, because it has lots of practical ideas for us to bring to the classroom as a possibility to engage task-based language teaching in our remote teaching right now. I was just going to add that. Mm-hmm. Raquel, I'm sorry, your turn.
Sorry, I sometimes forget that I am muted. Then I think that we might go on and watch the second testimonial, right? So Ana Flávia is going to put there. So it is Gabriel Bones, a 19-year-old high school student at UFSC Campus Itajaí. So let us listen to what he has to say and what Marta will comment.
Hi, so how are you all doing? My name is Gabriel Bones, and I'm a 19-year-old high school student at a federal institution in Santa Catarina, Brazil. And well, my academic experience with remote learning at school during the pandemic wasn't easy at all, since either teachers and students were kind of placed in this new teaching and learning context without even being prepared to do it with some kind of quality pattern. So in terms of challenges, I can personally say that even having good and plenty access to the technologies that were required, I still face a lot of difficulties, such as managing, organizing, and preparing my personal method and place of study during this phase. In this sense, I watched my first online live class in my bed, where I slept after 20 minutes of it. Therefore, I consider really, really important to instruct and give support to the students so they can well manage all these access and practicity that we have in order to obtain quality of learning. And speaking of language learning, technology has played an important role in my life, since learning foreign languages is a passion and a hobby for me. And throughout the internet, I could find technological tools that not only helped me to learn new vocabulary and grammar in free online courses, for example, but where I could also find apps such as Anki to memorize and Sending to practice with native speakers. Moreover, I can use also YouTube, Netflix, and newspapers to expose myself to topics of my personal interest in my target language. However, I would say that my biggest achievement in terms of language learning in the remote context was creating and offering to the community a conversation project in 3 different languages with my 2 English teachers through Google Meet platform. And to finish, my question is, what is the advice you would give to someone who is learning a language alone and in the internet? Thank you so much, guys. Take care.
Wow. I wish my students, high school students, were like that. Oh my goodness. It's like, what recommendation you do? Watch your video. Do what you do. I think he's doing pretty good. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I think he's doing all the right things. You know, I'll address some of his challenges too, but I think he's totally on the right path. Autonomous learning has to go through what you want to do. So if you're, entrepreneur person like he is, and you want to create a space for others to involve in a community of learning, that's great. If you're more of a person that wants to work, that wants to watch Netflix and then wants to go into a Reddit about that movie and then write a little bit about it, ask questions, comment to people how you like the movie or not in a forum, then that's also up to you. So it's actually quite connected. The first teacher actually needs to facilitate what the second student is actually doing, right? Which is a little bit of autonomous learning if you cannot do it in class. So he's doing quite a lot of things that are totally right. Yes. So whatever motivates the students, again, a little bit in line with the previous video, is have students to do 3 hours of language, 5 hours of language, of whatever motivates them, because they will be using the language. I think as teachers, we always think that we have to be the beacon of teaching and the beacon of grading, and that is a really difficult pattern to break everywhere in the world. I've given talks from Japan to everywhere, to Germany, and it's exactly the same everywhere in the world. Teachers, we think that students totally need us and that we have to be the center of teaching, but that's actually not very much true. It is okay to guide the students, and we see that this student is asking for guidance, so I'll give you a few keys here. But it is also okay to let them go, like your children, when they're a little bit ready, it's like, let them go, let them use the language. They need to become lifelong learners, right? Or autonomous learners. They need to be able to learn past our classes. So we need to encourage them to learn autonomously. So provide them now, that's the important thing, provide them with the tools and provide them with the guidance of what to do with those tools, right? So this kid was a little bit lost because the teachers were lost, right? All of us were thrown in like, okay, now we'll teach online. And everybody was like, what? I mean, what am I supposed to do, right? I mean, that was the same in Brazil as was here in Hawaii. So it was very difficult for everybody. And we were all, personally, I wasn't lost, but yeah, all my teachers were also lost, right? In what do we do? So I think what we need to do is the behind the scenes work for the students, is saying, Okay, what do you like to do? You like to use YouTube. Okay, well, so this is the plan, right? For my 7 students that like to do YouTube. Here are a few tasks that you can do. These are good videos that you can watch. There's these Edpuzzle. Does everybody know what Edpuzzles are? Oh, I can show you a little bit later, or you can explore it on your own. It's called Edpuzzle. It's a free tool, and you can take a video and do Edpuzzle, and you can do some questions on it. You can cut the video at any point and ask questions. So they can be from multiple choice questions to writing a whole essay. There's a variety, but you can take a video and make an activity out of those videos. Or again, if you're gonna watch a movie in Netflix, these are good movies to watch. And after you watch the movie, I want you to do X, Y, and Z. I want you to go to a forum. I want you to find an entry about it. I want you to read it. And then I want you to write about it, whether you agree or disagree and what the opinion is. And then not only you post it, you print it, you give it to me. That's how I'm gonna evaluate you and give you feedback, right? Most of the learning is done autonomously. You're still giving them feedback and you're still be able to assess them in what you have done. So I think guiding them in the tasks that they can do with those technologies is what would give them more structure. So that's one. And the other one is guides of how to, the simple things of, how to do a Zoom class. We actually had to include these in our syllabi, right? It's like you cannot attend class in your pajamas, laying down in your bed, eating your toast for breakfast. It's like whatever you will not be doing in a regular classroom, you cannot do in a class. At the first couple of weeks, I had people taking classes, smoking, having their coffee. I'm like, excuse me, I mean, that's very distracting to everybody, right? And then things that they may not know, like, it's not very productive to have a fan seen on the back of your head, because in a Zoom class, for those of you that are looking at you while you talk, gets them dizzy or it's very distracting. So things that they, we never had to think about it, but there's lots of different videos and different tools to help students with this. So I mean, I'll be happy to share the ones that we created for our students. One of our teachers is actually doing now a little doodle video for students also. So give them guidance. They do need to feel that they're still learning and they have your support. Doing fun things, they don't think they're learning, although they are. We know they are, but they don't think they're learning. So in order for them to feel that they are learning, you have to give them some structure. There has to be some type of evaluation afterwards. Feedback is really important. So I think if you're able to put those 3 little, well, not little, big implementations within what they are doing already, you can get a lot done. Did I address everything that he had? My God, he's doing so much.
I guess you did, and you did more than that. It's a very, very elucidating and very useful pieces of advice that sometimes we do not think of, right? And that might be little things, but will do a lot of difference in students' life, because this issue of being autonomous, this is something that has to be nurtured, right? It's not something that they are going to be out of a sudden. For instance, our student is already autonomous, right? He already knows how to do that, but not all students will be like this. So also there is this issue of how we go about, building room for them to be able then to be the sort of students that we want them to be. And also how difficult also it is for us as teachers to take this step back, in the sense of not feeling so much responsible or needing to be in the center so that things happen, but to back up also and to orchestrate that from behind. Right?
Yeah,
so,
and like a good orchestra, that's a good analogy. They're not all violins, right? You have to be able to address the violins, the violas, the flutes, right? So sometimes for a teacher, it's a little bit more challenging at the beginning because you have to prepare, you know, some activities for the 7 that want to do Netflix, 5 more for the ones that want to do gaming, 3 more for the ones that want to do a telecollaborative project, right? But that's an investment. I always tell my teachers, you don't recycle those totally all the time, right? Once you have prepared a set of activities that can be done in Netflix or that can be done in a telecollaborative italki, which you don't have to prepare the telecollaboration, just the tasks, right? Then that's done. The next semester, you can use the same for the students, right? And that's an investment. You keep creating a little bit at a time, but you have a front investment and then you leave out of just improving that. So it's not a lot of work all the time. It's just an initial chunk of work.
Exactly.
Yes, that's for sure, Marta. You have shared with us, and I will be leaving our session full of new ideas so that I can do some new things with my business student that we are dealing with a Moodle environment, and but then, you know, really, really very illuminating. Well, would you like to say something, Jo?
No, I think it's fine.
Yes, I guess that then we are going to move to the very last part, which has to do questions that were posed by the audience. And then I think that André and Priscilla are in charge of them, right, guys?
Yes. Hello, Marta. How are you?
Hello,
Nice
Priscilla.
to see you. So we have 2 questions from the audience, and also we have a comment that is related to one of the questions. So I'll start with the comment, and then I'll introduce the first question. So Adriano, he is a public school teacher, and he says that in his opinion, it's important to involve teachers in these discussions that we are having here, and also encouraging teachers for researching in the area. So then, you know, these ideas can actually be applied in the classes. And then he says that there must be a dialogue between universities and schools all the time. Otherwise, we end up having this kind of discussions here, and then this doesn't actually have any influence, right, in the classrooms, in the actual classrooms. And then making a link of this comment to the question. The question was, what are some important aspects that we have to consider when working with teacher development if we want to work on the relationship between TBLT and technology with these teachers that are interested in implementing this relationship in their classrooms?
So yes, totally, not only important, is essential. I mean, the teachers have to be involved. So I would say the first important thing is to understand the context, right? So if you don't understand the context where those teachers are working, neither the tasks nor the technology are going to work very well. So we need to understand the context first for the technology, right? Just the basics of that context for technology. So what kind of technology access is there? What kind of support? Do they have internet or not? Is it stable or not? Because you can't develop tasks without knowing technology-mediated tasks, without knowing what technology capacities are there. And the context is also the same thing for tasks. And that I go back, I'm like a broken record, but that's why a needs analysis is essential, right? So the most important people in that needs analysis are those teachers, are those students. It's like, what do these students need to learn while they're in the school? Who knows that? The teachers and the administration, right? And then maybe the teachers in the first year of university that expect the students to know certain things, right? They also have some input there. And also the students need also know what they know how to do that sometimes the teachers don't, right? And again, if we're going to promote a little bit of autonomous learning, we need to know what they like to do, what they can do, and what also is their technological capacities at home, right? Because we do things in a school, but like I was saying, ask a student to game for 3 hours. Well, if they don't have a good internet at home, that is not going to happen, right? Most likely they won't be gamers then, but so we need to know that. So I think the main role of teachers there is they should be the ones conducting this needs analysis with the support of the researcher or the university teacher, guiding, creating the questions, and then looking at the data, analyzing the data, helping with that. And then they are the ones that should look at the report and say, okay, so what are we gonna do with this, right? I think we should implement this task and this task and this task to start, see how teachers are doing, and then maybe we can move on to these other ones, right? So I think teachers should be the center of anything that is done in their classrooms. I mean, it's, to me, it's like basic research. And of course, they should be doing action research. You know, if you're a teacher and you're a good teacher, all good teachers want to know if what they are doing works or not, right? I mean, no one goes into teaching and go, oh, well, yeah, whatever, I'll just teach. But if they don't learn, who cares, right? I'm hoping there's not many teachers like that in the world. So every teacher wants to know where things work. So I think sometimes teachers get scared because we say action research and it has the word research in it. It's like, I don't want to do research, right? But that's not it. It's basically, okay, let's figure out if what you're doing works. Yeah, and let's see how you can do it. And at least that has worked in my experience. You know, just get it in the hands of the teachers. They're the ones that know. Just support them in how they can do it and help them, you know, sometimes maybe doing the data analysis, maybe a little bit overwhelming if they've never done, you know, data analysis. But other than that, you know, teachers are the ones that need to know to do these things.
Yeah, I'm so glad you answered that because, you know, I've been working with teacher development with my students from the English program here at UFSC. And this is exactly what we have been discussing, you know, the relevance of the context. Like all the time I'm repeating to them, the context makes all the difference, right? And also one thing that you mentioned that that makes a lot of sense to me. It's this idea that TBLT, then it's not a recipe, right? It's there is no recipe, actually. There is no one single way or the best way to do something. There is the context, and then you're going to be analyzing this context so then you can make decisions. And then that has to do with the idea of the reflexive teacher, right? So always understanding that it's not about always making sure you're doing the right choice, but it's actually understanding the possible impacts of your choices to your students, to the context, and so on. So thank you so much, Marta, for this answer. And then the other question we have here is related to the comment you made about translanguaging. So the question is, can you give us some ideas on how to work with translanguaging in the TBLT lesson?
Yes, I wish I could send you to read something about it, but there's nothing about it to read. So I will just give you my initial thoughts of what I have been reflecting on. And, you know, when I read about translanguaging, I'm always, you know, on the back thinking, how do I translate it into what I work with, right? So, for example, if you're doing a task that intrinsically has more than one language associated to it, right? Like I'm going back to gaming, for example, right? Sometimes when you're gaming in one language, but actually maybe the quest that you're doing or what you have to read in the text, or it's in a different language, right? Most old-time teachers would say, no, because that's not in the L2. Right? That's in the L1, so this is not good. And now we know that actually doesn't matter. That it's cognitively, it has the same impact, and sometimes it actually can help. So if the instructions are in the L1, so if you're doing any technology and the instructions are in the L1, we say, well, you know, this would be much better in the L2, and because it's input, and yes, but at certain levels, like for very beginner students, if they're not understanding how this works, nothing after that is work. So translanguaging in this case, code switching going into the L1 for whatever small point period, it's okay. It's not a bad thing. So translanguage is a way of looking at the use of L1 in the classroom in a little bit of a different way. Not such as a boogeyman, bad thing, but also in a utilitarian way. If students are writing in a blog and that blog happens to be multilingual and they use their languages, or they're doing telecollaboration and they're learning each other's languages, right? First instances of telecollaboration, we say only the L2. They write in German, you write in English, and that's all, right? But now we know that actually translanguaging and using each other's L1s and L2s together actually helps them learning, because they're facilitating their structures. They're giving each other feedback that is useful and timely at that moment in the L1. So it's much more useful to have that little piece of L1 feedback than not understanding it because it's in the L2 and keep on going. So those practices are actually, well, now in SLA, we're understanding them as actually beneficial. Doesn't mean that the whole activity is in your L1. No, there's have to be punctual things, punctual uses of the L1, but they're not seen as that bad anymore. Does that make sense? As examples?
It makes a lot of sense.
Okay. If you wanna, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that it reminded me of Jason Parba's dissertation. Jason, the professor who was Dr. Crook's advisees, and he worked with a lot of translanguaging in the classroom. And one of his findings was exactly what you mentioned, that it aided students to feel more comfortable in developing both critical perspectives and also language. He was working with Filipino. He was teaching Filipino with a Filipino class. So, you know, that's one study that actually has this finding, and we can see, maybe see it as an evidence for that, for what you're saying.
Mm-hmm. It helps building community and building relationships too. So there's a couple of studies also in the use of L1 in the classroom to build relationships. So to create relationships with the students by making jokes or by giving cultural references to the L1 that cannot be done otherwise in the L2. So yeah, there's quite a lot of evidence. We're accumulating now a lot more evidence on that use. Just posted on the chat, Ofelia Garcia in Florida and Leeway are two of the researchers looking more in depth as to translanguaging. It's not necessarily with technology, but they look at, you know, translanguaging in the L2 classroom.
Okay, and then we have one last comment from that was just posted from Thelma Amorim, and she says she's commenting on how needs analysis is a kind of a complex term, because if it means if you're thinking about what to teach, it's related to the syllabus design, but also if you're thinking about how to teach, it may be related to students' interests and preferences in the learning styles and so on. So if you could comment a little on how to go about engaging in the needs analysis to finish.
I think a needs analysis can be from very simple in class to the whole institutional needs analysis. So there's many different degrees of needs analysis. But yes, through a needs analysis, you are supposed to find the what language, the what tool, right? So the what task, what language, what tool. I think the how comes more from your methodology. So if you think you're going to do things with tasks, then you're probably going to address those what through tasks. If you're going to do it through communicative language teaching, then you're going to address those whats through CLT. So, but it can be something as simple as asking the students in your class what their interests are. Those are not needs, they're wants. It's a little bit different, right? Needs analysis, what the students need to do in order to be able to do something, right? Wants is what they want to use the language for, which is important, but may not be the only thing, right? There has to be a little bit of triangulation. So for example, the teachers at the next level should also be consulted, like, or you know, your curriculum in different levels, right? It's like, what do students need in order to pass to the next level, right? Or if they have an exam at the end, what does exam entitle? Documentation, what does our guidelines for the department mean? What do they need to know at the end of this semester? So putting all of that together will give you the what. But now the how, if you decide you're going to do it through tasks, then you have to decide what kind of tasks I create that address those needs. I think also you can address them in different ways, right? Some can be addressed by a task, some may be addressed by a focus on form. So it's, you know, they need to know past tense. Okay, we're going to learn it as part of different tasks, but if they're not that good, they need to have certain complexity, then there have to be some focus on form. So mini grammar lessons, right? That help them push them up to that level. I don't know if I answered that.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much, Marta. And now we go back to Ju and Raquel to end our session.
Okay, so thank you so much, Marta, for being with us this afternoon, right? Morning for you. It was really a delight to have you sharing your knowledge and your experiences and how you understand and how we maybe should also understand this intricate, complex, but really beautiful interface of tasks and technology, right? Many issues were raised and we end up realizing the important role teachers have in orchestrating the whole thing. Also, the important role of us in also to encourage ourselves to use technology and learn from that, because as teachers, we are always learners, and to perceive that there are still many unanswered issues that it's up to us to motivate ourselves in research and to try to elucidate issues that go hand in hand with language pedagogy, right? So be sure that at least I can talk, considering my experience today, that I do have many things to be remembered from 10 years from now, considering our talk today. Okay, so thank you very much for being with us, for taking your time, and let us hope that you have other opportunities to talk again and to share experiences and to especially learn from them. I'd like Ju also to say some words. So thank you very much, Marta.
Very welcome.
Very welcome. Yes, Raquel has said everything, and I'm gonna repeat just the thank you part. Thank you so much again, Marta. It was an inspiring afternoon to all of us, I'm sure. I took lots of notes, and you'll be hearing from me in a couple of years and when I hopefully try to carry on some pieces of research with you. And yeah, we just have to say thank you, and hopefully some other time we can meet again and share more of these ideas and experiences. Thanks a lot. Indeed.
Anytime. It's always a pleasure. So anytime. Hopefully we'll get to do these face-to-face at some time,
Yes.
some point in the
That's true.
future.
Yes, at
hopefully.
some point, because being together, we have been realizing that makes the whole difference, right? That brings this human ingredient that despite of the fact that we are somehow together, right? Close to one another, we have been missing, you know, these moments of face-to-face interaction, okay?
Yes, I'm missing the hugs.
The hugs, yes, yes. Also, thank you very much for the audience, right? For the whole team that was with us this afternoon. And when we started thinking of the format for our lives, we really would like to have something of a more, let's say, format. And I think that we really got it right, because the first time that we met with Roseli and Paula, and now with you, Marta, that's the sort of thing that we discussed, very important theoretical issues that also inform teaching, right? But the format is a very light one, and we end up just chatting and not leaving, you know, the meeting with the sense of, oh, so many theoretical issues being discussed. And in this sense, I think that as a team also, we were very happy with the format that we have been chosen for these chats. And again, especially for having you here this afternoon with us. Okay, so thank you so much again. And thank you everybody for being with us. And I think that's it. Let's close.
Okay, bye-bye. Thank you all for being here.
Bye, thank you for listening.
And have a lovely day, Marta.